Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, September 30th, 2023, and today we're going to be talking about the Pennsylvania Republican Party and their endorsement of Dave McCormick alongside numerous mainstream Republicans in the 2024 races, whether that comes down to state auditor, whether that comes down to state treasurer, whether that comes down now to the United States Senate. This endorsement comes a bit of a contrast to a decision that was made back in 2022 when they declined to make an endorsement in 2022 for the Senate race and allowed the voters to ultimately decide. This time around, they're not taking any chances and instead endorsing Dave McCormick, the candidate who failed to beat Dr. Oz back in 2022, lost that primary by a very competitive roughly 1,000 votes between the two out of 1.4 million cast. Dave McCormick receiving this endorsement from the Pennsylvania Republican Party doesn't necessarily come out as much of a surprise to many people watching Pennsylvania politics, but it is a very early stance from a very, very prominent Republican Party, and one that goes to show that they want it to be Dave McCormick through, hell and high water. And with this endorsement on the GOP side, I can't but help to think back to the same criticism that doomed Dr. Oz's campaign from the very beginning back in 2022. When John Fetterman defeated Dr. Oz, it came as a shock to many people given the circumstances of the year, the expectations in the polls, and John Fetterman's health as he had just recently been recovering from a stroke. But the problem was that Dr. Oz didn't appeal to the state of Pennsylvania in the way that practically many Republicans might have been able to. We have seen the potential bench that could have ran for Senate that ultimately declined to return to their cushiony House seats, decided to against re-entering into politics in some circumstances, and allowed Dr. Oz, who was endorsed by Donald Trump very, very heavily. I mean, very much promoted by Donald Trump, endorsed by Donald Trump. He did ads, he did rallies, the whole spiel. Donald Trump gave Dr. Oz that nomination only for Dr. Oz to go on to lose. But a main criticism around Dr. Oz, I'm sure you might know this, but the neighboring state of New Jersey was where Dr. Oz actually resided for an overwhelming majority of his life. His only connection to Pennsylvania, that he had a home in Pennsylvania out of the 11 that he had nationwide. Now, Dr. Oz is not necessarily someone that, is or Dave McCormick's not necessarily as celebritized as Dr. Oz, not as well known for his money, but Dave McCormick also isn't from the state of Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know how much this will actually make a difference, genuinely speaking, just because Dr. Oz had been on TV shows praising the state of New Jersey, had been very proud of his New Jersey residence, and moving over to Pennsylvania, it very much looked like a carpetbag move. And the reason why that matters in Pennsylvania, I know this might be a little bit of an interesting point, but there are studies done across states, especially in the Midwestern region, about how many people actually stay in their state from where they are born. And in a lot of states like Florida and California, New York, there's a lot of moving, right? There's a lot of going in and out of the state to different states, to the Atlanta, to Phoenix, right? To areas that are growing in population, but in specifically states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you're talking about 60-70% of retention within the state, which means they don't necessarily appreciate candidates, people who come just into the state for the purpose of entering into politics. And I think that's what we're going to see here shaped around Dave McCormick. And I hate to say this to the Republican Party too, but Bob Casey is not John Fetterman. John Fetterman is not Bob Casey. They are two very different candidates with two very different sets of stances, but only one, in terms of his family, in terms of himself, is treated as political royalty in the state of Pennsylvania, and it's not John Fetterman who beat Dr. Oz against all the odds in 2022. It's the candidate that Dave McCormick is now running against. This endorsement from the Pennsylvania GOP, I think, on its own, doesn't necessarily scream anything negative. But when you look deeper into the considerations around Bob Casey's expected re-election, who they endorsed him with, what the expectations are for 2024, who he will be running alongside, there are problems here that already tell us that Dave McCormick will be in for an interesting run. Because Dr. Oz was endorsed by Donald Trump, that meant that Donald Trump attacked Dave McCormick. That meant that Dave McCormick responded to Donald Trump's attacks. That meant they went back and forth, that they were saying, Trump is going after McCormick. McCormick is condemning. The Pennsylvania Democrats picked up on that, and they're showing this all around. Boosts Pennsylvania Senate candidate Mehmet Oz and declares rival Dave McCormick not MAGA. How do you think this is going to play amongst the average voter in the state of Pennsylvania if the candidate who he is running alongside, and it looks a lot closer today than it did a week ago, than it did 6 months ago, that Donald Trump will be the GOP nominee, but how do you think that is going to play in the state of Pennsylvania specifically? That is what I'm wondering, because Donald Trump has all of these attacks against Dave McCormick that Democrats have been able to use eloquently, have been able to take Donald Trump's words and use them against himself, against the candidates that he went after. And that means that Democrats have yet again another point to go deep on Dave McCormick and win the 2024 Senate race. Now, I will say that Dave McCormick does have less scandal baggage than I think Dr. Oz does, but then again, he has not been vetted to the same level that Dr. Oz has. Dave McCormick has been very much flirtatious with this potential, Senate bid, but only now that he's practically the presumptive nominee will Democrats start to dive in deeper, unearth all those things that they did for Dr. Oz, and find things they can unearth about Dave McCormick, use it to attack him, use it to win the race. And Republicans are going to look back and say, where did we go wrong? My problem here isn't that Dave McCormick on his own is someone who could lose the race. I think that's one thing, but it's that there were also other options as well. You have to look at this too in perspective that they chose the runner-up from the GOP primary. Imagine in 2024, Ted Cruz was going to be that nominee. Everyone knows that's the wrong decision, so why do it here? Why do it for the candidate that was declared not MAGA, right? Why do it for the person who went against President Trump, who had gone back and forth? These are things that absolutely mattered in 2022, and for the Republican Party to think that just 2 years later it isn't going to make any difference is a little bit more naive than they would like to let on. And I think that's ultimately their problem that will potentially cause, a detriment in this race. And like I said, on the Republican side, there were other possibilities. Now, not Doug Mastriano, not Kathy Barnett. Stacey Garrity could have been a viable option. You also could have had someone like Carla Sands, who very much could run, and could is a very big word, because she did run. She did run in 2022, didn't get endorsed by Donald Trump, but she would be a better choice. They could pull a U.S. representative who has a big district, who has the pull, who has the name recognition in some areas of the state, but instead, they went for the runner-up from the last election. And even in preliminary primary polling, which again is a testament to show just how much voters do not want it to be Dave McCormick on the GOP side because of the same things that were said about him. When Doug Mastriano announced that he wasn't running for Senate, Democrats knew it cleared the field for Dave McCormick, because also it was being backed up by polling done by public policy polling that showed Dave McCormick losing to Doug Mastriano in head-to-head matchups 42-28. In a three-way race, only getting 21% of the vote. He might remember 21%. Why would he remember 21%? Well, let's go back and look at the Pennsylvania race. He got a little bit more than that, roughly around 30% in the Republican primary against Dr. Oz. Definitely an improvement off 21%, but the fact is, too, that the polling suggested that he was going to do worse than he did in 2022. There is a problem here. There's an enthusiasm problem. There's a carpetbagging problem. There's an association with Donald Trump being at the top of the ticket, being disconnected from Dave McCormick. This starts to form this idea, yet again, like in 2022, that the perfect storm is coming to allow Democrats to win again in 2024. And the one major difference that I think is the most important one is who's running on the Democratic side. And it isn't just a little-known lieutenant governor across the state. It's Bob Casey Jr. Heavy on the junior part for a reason. Because if you're wondering, why does this matter? Who is Bob Casey Sr.? He was the governor of Pennsylvania. He also served in the state Senate. He was also the auditor general in the state of Pennsylvania. He also paved the way for Democrats, specifically his children, in the state of Pennsylvania. People know this family. They like this family. They support people like Bob Casey. And in every election that Bob Casey has ran in, you know what? Why don't I just show you so you can see how strong of a candidate he is. In 2006, he defeated incumbent Republican Senator Rick Santorum by 17.4%. In 2012, he won against a Republican opponent by a margin of 9.1% when Obama underperformed Bob Casey. Obama underperformed Bob Casey. The same Obama who in 2012 was winning these states. Let's look: Pennsylvania by 5, Michigan by 10, Wisconsin by 7, all states that went to Donald Trump the election after. So that's something to point out. And then you look at 2018, Bob Casey defeated Lou Barletta by a margin of 13.1%. So the history is 17, 9, 13. What is to say that all of a sudden now Republicans are going to win? Bob Casey very clearly had crossover voters. When you take a look at the House margin in the state of Pennsylvania in 2018, you see that as well. Democrats did well here, but Bob Casey did better. This is a state that Donald Trump won in 2016. Bob Casey won it by 13 2 years later. That is the difference here. Yes, national environments were off, but do I have to remind you the national environment that led to Democrats winning the Pennsylvania Senate race by 5 points in 2022 led Democrats to winning the governor's race in the state of Pennsylvania by a margin of 15 points, shifted every single county to the left relative to 2020, even when the national in 2020 had seen states shift right from 2016. It isn't normal for every single county to shift to the left, but it happened not because John Fetterman was the stellar candidate, which in a way he was, but also, and I'm not saying this to push him down, but also because Mehmet Oz was a bad candidate with baggage, with very similar baggage that Dave McCormick has, and the problem too, that it literally could have been someone else. That there could have been another opportunity here, and given how much money that was poured onto John Fetterman's side, put into this race, $75 million. The article here seems to suggest that, Dave McCormick has a lot of money. He doesn't need to fundraise, and in a way that's correct. But don't underestimate the amount of money that Democrats are willing to put into this race. And this doesn't even count a lot of the external funding that happened in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, that is a problem too, that Democrats haven't even come to terms with, that, they are excessively spending money on campaigns. But that's a whole other topic, a whole other video. But generally speaking, Dave McCormick might have money, but Democrats are going to be there. And they also found that the race itself cost more than $360 million. Open Secrets only suggests here that it's roughly, $125 million? Well, that's because that's what was raised by these candidates. And you have to look elsewhere. You have to look outside. And seeing that it means Democrats out-fundraise Republicans here and outspent them, that Democrats will certainly have that chest to, to count on. Even though Dave McCormick might be taking out of his own personal fortune here, it's very possible that Democrats can counteract that, especially someone as well-liked, as well respected, and as well, historically in terms of his elections, very, very strong. His political prowess is one that I do not think Republicans are ready to combat, and yet for some reason, they're going all in on a failed candidate from 2022. I will say, when we reflect on this race in about a year and a half from now, after the new senator, or whoever it might be, Bob Casey again, or Dave McCormick is sworn in, we will look back on videos like this and question, what were we right about in the beginning? What were the red flags, and were there any red flags? And right now, it's as if I'm on the moon right now, following a space landing, waving this red flag, and there's no wind for anything to wave, so you're just seeing me do it. And you're starting to see that, this is a huge red flag. This is something that I would say, if I was a political consultant and I was in the GOP headquarters, I'm pulling them in. Don't run this guy. Don't run Dave McCormick. He might be, on paper, a better candidate than Dr. Oz, but why is Dr. Oz this point of comparison? That means that anyone could have won. Yes, Dr. Oz got close, but any Republican would have reasonably in a swing state like that, unless they were like Doug Mastriano. Neither Dave McCormick or Dr. Oz were as crazy, and I say that because some of the stances he has taken borderline that point, but that is a little bit more of a politically charged statement. But as extreme, maybe that's the right word for it, I think Dave McCormick just does not give what he needs to in order to win this race, and it is very, very apparent for those who are outside of the Pennsylvania GOP. It is very apparent that this is a candidate who is on track to lose in the same way that Dr. Oz was, in the same way that Herschel Walker was, in the same way that a lot of candidates that we could see from day one were not poised to win a Senate race, and now they're running them again. And we also remember that there's a reason why the Wisconsin GOP isn't running someone right now in the state of Wisconsin. Why their party is pulling back and all of their sitting representatives are refusing to run in the race. You can see here that the only candidate who is announced on the Republican side that is somewhat, recognizable is a county supervisor. Then you also have the chair of the UW College Republicans, and that's it. Look at those who have said no. U.S. Representative, U.S. Representative, U.S. Representative, Governor of Wisconsin. That's a problem. That is such a problem. And I think that's where you're starting to see questions arise. Why did the Wisconsin Republicans not run in Wisconsin, but why are Pennsylvania Republicans going full force on this guy who very well could also drag down ballot candidates? I think the problem is that there is no winning candidate in the state of Pennsylvania, and so they are going all in on one person they think might be able to do slightly better. But realistically speaking, I think there could have been a different circumstance where Pennsylvania was a lot more competitive. I think there could have been an opportunity here to elevate some of their other candidates, to boost turnout on the Senate level, to boost turnout in the down ballot races. Donald Trump could drag down the party, and Dave McCormick would be of no assistance in keeping them afloat. I think there is going to be an autopsy report on this election that says, where did the Pennsylvania GOP go wrong yet again, ? And the answer is going to be by nominating and endorsing a candidate like Dave McCormick, because they are so trigger happy that the moment that Dave McCormick announces, he announced literally a week ago, and immediately gets the endorsement because they are afraid of holding out, refusing to endorse, declining to endorse. And they see this as a problem, which it was. They see this as something that weighed them down last time. And again, it was because they didn't intervene in a way that maybe they could have had a different circumstance had they thought it out earlier on. And I think with the original timeline with Sean Parnell, it could have been a lot better. But again, hypotheticals all over the world here. But I think this time the Pennsylvania GOP is so afraid of being wrong like they were in 2022 that the moment they had an opportunity to choose anyone, they stuck with them. And now they have a committed, complete, and total endorsement of Dave McCormick. And this is far from anything that exudes political strength, political stamina, electability. And I think Republicans will see that after November 2024, when Bob Casey is reelected yet again, as he already has been elected 3 times across the state of Pennsylvania. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.